Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who do not know me, I am Sasha Demian, the Executive Director of the MBCEA. A few housekeeping items before we get started. I would ask everyone to please remain muted throughout the presentation just because it gets very distracting with background noise. So if I end up muting you, please do not be offended. And also, if you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat and we will get to them as appropriate. Now, if we look over at the slide, I just wanted to kind of share the upcoming events, make sure that they are on your calendar. The conference, 56th annual, is going to be May 7th through 9th next year in Charlotte, North Carolina. Sponsorship opportunities will open up in November and registration will open up in December. So make sure that those dates are on your calendar and you're watching our communication for registration for that. Also, renewal invoices will be coming out November 1st. So watch for those as well. They're due January 1st, so you don't lose out on your member benefits. If you do not have the MBCEA app downloaded to your phone, I'd like you to take your phone out right now and aim your camera at the appropriate QR code. Left side is for iPhones, right side is for Androids, and download the MBCEA app. Everyone should be on it. Everyone should keep notifications turned on. It's the way that we are communicating new things, surveys. It's the forum where you can go on and ask your fellow members any question about running your business, about what you're running into on the job site. We really want people to get engaged on it. You can also direct message other app users. So it's a great member benefit. And then as we move over to the left side, you'll see our next event is going to be the new member quarterly roundtable on October 16th at 1 o'clock. Even if you are not a new member, if you feel like you may not know what every single member benefit is available to you, you should sign up for that. I only take about 30 minutes and I run through a whole lot of stuff that is really beneficial to your membership, especially as we're coming up to renewal time. Make sure you're using everything that's available to you. Crane Lift Plan Requirements is going to be the next free webinar in our monthly series. That's on November 7th. And I encourage you to sign up for that now. Both of those are on our event page on our website. And sponsorship is also available for each of these monthly webinars. So if you would have been the sponsor for today's event, you would have a slide up right now and you would have a few minutes to speak about yourself, your company, and you would be introducing the presenter. So it's a first come, first serve. The product is there, products and services on our webpage to sponsor next month's event. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. As it is, we are going to have Robert Tiffin, the MBCEA president, introduce our presenter. So thank you again for joining us.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Sasha, and good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for joining us for the October installment of the MBCEA Presents. So this is a once a month nationally presented webinar as a value to our membership. A couple of things. One, it gets an opportunity to expand on education and topics within our industry, as well as, and thank you, Brendan, for joining us today to bring some people together where there might be a group that wants to start a chapter somewhere in it. So this gives an opportunity for people to get together as an industry and learn. But before, I'd just like to say we're very honored today to have Dr. Lee Shoemaker as our guest speaker. So Lee joined the MBMA 30 years ago as the Director of Research and Engineering. It was quite a leap for the MBMA to hire this teenager for this role, but Lee managed to balance this position with his paper route and his real passion, working at McDonald's. Unfortunately, only the MBMA position has panned out. So without further ado, our guest speaker, Dr. Lee Shoemaker. Lee, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Robert. You read that excellently. And I'm very proud of my bio. And don't forget, Robert, you assured me that there would be no fact checking during this webinar, so I'm going to hold you to that.
Perfect.
So let me share my screen. There we go. And I'm going to turn off my camera here so you're not looking at me the whole time here. There we go. There we go. So thank you for inviting me to make this presentation today on the MBCEA webinar on common industry practices. And we're going to be talking about that during the next 45 minutes or so. I usually start out a presentation with talking about MBMA, who is MBMA, and about what is a metal building system. But I feel like this audience doesn't need that background information. You are well aware of MBMA and what a metal building system is. But I will give you a little background on the common industry practices, and then talk about the contents, what you would find in the common industry practices, and some updates that we're in the process of making. And I'm happy to say that MBCEA was instrumental in helping us make some of the updates. We're glad to have MBCEA's input on that. And then some other MBMA resources that are available that you may or may not be aware of, but just so that you're aware of some things that might be useful to you. So the Code of Standard Practice for Steel Buildings and Bridges is a document that's put out by the American Institute of Steel Construction, AISC, and it's AISC 303 is the publication name. And I'm starting with that because sometimes there's some confusion about AISC's Code of Standard Practice and MBMA's Common Industry Practices and how those relate to each other. And so this is the scope from AISC's Code of Standard Practice, and you can see it sets forth criteria for the trade practices involved in design and construction of steel buildings, bridges, and other structures. But it also has in the commentary to the scope further explanation that says this code, meaning the Code of Standard Practice,
Oh,
I think you muted the wrong person. SS Builds is still talking and Lee is not.
Yeah, sorry about that. Lee, can you unmute?
Yep,
I
I got it.
apologize. I muted
Yes.
you by accident. The mouse
Yep.
jumped.
No problem. So I was just saying that's important, a distinction that the AISC Code of Standard Practice does not cover metal building systems as noted in their commentary. And the reason it doesn't is because metal building systems have different ways that they go to market and how the different responsibilities between engineers of record and so forth. And so that's why there's a distinction there. And the Steel Joist Institute has their own Code of Standard Practice, and MBMA has what we've always called the Common Industry Practices. And so that's an important difference. And as we go through this, I will point out a couple of key similarities and differences between our Code of Standard Practice and AISC's. So here's the cover of our Common Industry Practices. It's actually a free download from the MBMA website that I have a slide at the end that shows you how to get that free download off our site. It's also part of our Metal Building Systems Manual. It's Chapter 4 in the Metal Building Systems Manual, which is a 600-page document that has just about everything that MBMA has done over the years. And so, but we realized that this is such a valuable document that we wanted to make it as a free download and not just make it only available through the Metal Building Systems Manual. We did that starting last year. So this shows you the contents of the Common Industry Practice. There are 9 sections. an introduction, section 2 on the sale of a metal building system, section 3 on the design of a metal building system, section 4 materials and fabrication, section 5 delivery and receipt, section 6 erection and other field work, section 7 insurance, section 8 general, and section 9 on fabrication tolerances. And so we're going to go through, I'm obviously not going to go through every provision in the common industry practices, but especially the ones that we've recently updated and the edition that's going to be coming out shortly, and then also just how it all fits together in the context. So this is the introduction in our common industry practice, and the key thing to point out here is you can see it's not intended as a standard or as a specific guideline for the sale, design, manufacture, or erection of any particular metal building system. Rather, it is intended to serve as a general checklist to assist the parties in preparing specific order or contract documents governing the transaction in question. If the parties so desire, these common industry practices can be incorporated by reference in whole or in part into the order or contract documents for the sale of a metal building system. Wherever there is a conflict between the order or contract documents in these practices, however, the order or contract documents shall prevail. So I believe it's pretty standard within the metal building system industry for these common industry practices to be incorporated by reference in the order documents. But you can see that unless that happens, they really are just a suggestion. But if they are incorporated into the order documents, then that would govern unless there's a conflict as noted there. So the section 1.2 has a lot of important definitions because a lot of the common industry practices talks about who is responsible for what, how the different parties interact on a metal building project and sale. And so these are the current definitions that are in the common industry practices: manufacturer, contractor, general contractor, erector, assembler, builder, end customer, design professional, order documents, contract documents, and a construction project. And since we always are identifying new terminology, things evolve, and so we added a couple of new definitions in the revision to the common industry practices, the 2024 edition that's not out yet, but will be coming out shortly. We added a definition for construction manager, which is finding that's a common assignment that's being used on metal building projects now, and so just distinguishing what that is and how it's similar to a general contractor and so on. Then we've also defined a registered design professional in responsible charge, which is this is the official definition that the building code uses for what we typically call the engineer of record. It's sort of our shorthand, engineer of record or design professional of record. But this is the official building code definition of the EOR. And then we added a definition for erection drawings, which we didn't have included before, and felt that would be useful since we do refer to that in several places, and just to make sure that's clear with respect to the other documents.
Lee, can I interrupt for a second? I do
Yes.
see in the chat that Joe asked a question. If a contract specifies AISC, does that incorporate common practices by reference?
No, it's a good question. A contract will typically refer to AISC 360, the specification for design of structural steel, which is what MBMA members would use to design the structural steel on a project. But that doesn't cover the Code of Standard Practice, which is a separate document, and that's only incorporated, if it's part of the contract. Now, AISC has the same issue with regard to what is the legal document, and so they have the AISC 360 is the document that's referred to in the building code, and so everything in the AISC 360 applies to structural steel. But then they have their separate Code of Standard Practice, which is not part of the building code. It's not part of AISC 360. And so they've had issues where they actually would like some of the stuff in their Code of Standard Practice to be, codified. And so over the last couple of years, they've they've gone through the process of taking some of the things in their code of standard practice, which is not a legal requirement, and putting it into the 360, making it part of the legal requirement. So they've been going through that exercise. And so sometimes when they do that, we say, wait a minute, that doesn't apply to metal buildings. And so that's kind of, causing some, discrepancies. And so we had them add some notes to refer back to our common industry practice when there's a discrepancy. So that's a good question.
Thanks, Lee. I have a building that we're working on where they actually did incorporate. They said everything will be according to the 303 and the 360. And I wondered if that inherently, because of the comment section where it references MBMA, is in one of the comment sections of the 303. It's not actually in the text. So I just wondered how binding any of that could be.
Yeah. I'm not a contract expert, so I can't really comment on how binding it is. But usually I'm not familiar with the contract referring to AISC 303 as a requirement on the metal building project, but that might be something you have to figure out. Okay, let me proceed, and as if you have questions, please enter them in the chat, and Sasha will decide if it's a question that would be best taken up as we go through it, or perhaps hold it to the end of the presentation. So please ask any questions like that you have. Section 2 is on the sale of a metal building system. And so in that section, there are some things that I wanted to point out to this audience that you would be interested in. This is the section on generally included parts. That's the parts that are included in the sale of a metal building system that are established in the order documents between the manufacturer and the builder. And it says a typical sale may include the following parts. And we did make one slight edit. Instead of saying the end and interior frames, just the main frames. That actually was a suggestion from MBCEA to clarify that. So we appreciate that. And then another thing that we've added based on some discussions with MBCEA is we added this line there that's under number 3 for nuts and bolts. It says a sufficient number of bolting assemblies are provided to enable pre-installation verification testing as discussed in section 6.10.2 for pre-tension joints. We're going to be talking about section 6.10, which is a new section we've added on pre-installation verification. But the reason that we added this is, and here's another difference between our common industry practice and AISC 303. The AISC Code of Standard Practice 303 has a specific number of bolts that are to be supplied, extra bolts. I don't know off the top of my head what that number is, but it's specific in terms of the number of bolts that need to be supplied. And we discussed that within our manual subcommittee and the technical committee about, should we have a similar requirement in our common industry practice? And we decided on just a more general term, leaving it to the manufacturer in terms of the number of extra bolting assemblies they provide, but understanding that they need to provide enough to enable the pre-installation verification testing. And of course, depending on whether a job has all snug tight bolt requirements or whether there are some pre-tension bolt requirements on a job, that would also dictate the number of extra bolts that would be needed for this purpose. And so we left that as a more general statement, but we feel that will at least recognize the fact that those extra bolts do need to be supplied for that verification testing. And then there's a section 2.1.2 under accessories that we added some things to that. We took off hanger doors because typically the metal building manufacturer is not the one providing the hanger doors. But we've added some other things that the metal building manufacturer is more likely to provide in certain situations. The component cladding frame partition walls, liner panels for roofs, ceilings, or walls, and then lintels if attached to the metal building framing. And then with a note about the loads from lintels will need to be provided to the manufacturer to be incorporated into the design of the metal building system. So again, this is a it's a list, and it says these items will only be provided if expressly specified by the builder in the order documents. But this is the list that typically would be of accessories that might be included in those order documents. So now if we move on to Section 3, Design of a Metal Building System. Design responsibility, of course, is a very important section, and we added a new sentence under design responsibility that in the event of a discrepancy between the plans and the specifications prepared by the registered design professional or engineer of record and the order documents govern. So the metal building manufacturer really is, they're going by the order documents, and that's important to make sure that that's understood, that the specifications that are prepared by registered design professional or EOR need to be totally and completely included in the order documents, whether they're attached as information that's passed forward, or whether that information is interpreted and entered into the order documents. It's the order documents that the metal building manufacturer is going by. And then under the section under general, we added one extra line there, one word, other requirements which affect the design, manufacture, or erection of the metal building system, just to cover all the bases in terms of the responsibility there of the end customer with respect to current complete specifications that affect that. And then let me just go back to slides to continue on this discussion. So this is talking about the complete specifications that are submitted and are included in the order documents. And this then is the list that would be what could be included in those specifications. And this is not all of the list, but it's the first 5 items on the list, because we made a few changes to that list that I just wanted to point out. Again, some of this is just clarification. It doesn't really change anything, but it's just clarification when the applicable code or standard is referenced, making sure that includes the specific addition. And then when the design loads are included, making sure that rain and if tornado loads are now required, because the ASCE 7 now has tornado loads in there, and they have to make the building manufacturer needs to know if that is to be included. Currently, tornado loads are only in the ASCE 722, which are referenced in IBC 2024. So we probably really haven't seen that kick in yet, other than perhaps in Florida, who's adopted 722. But you'll be seeing that more often, and certain buildings and certain locations will be required to be designed for tornadoes, and so that information needs to be included in the specifications. And then adding this rainwater discharge onto existing buildings. Again, anything that might affect the design and needs to be considered that the building manufacturer, designer needs to be aware of. And this is an important thing that we've added here. In section 3.2.3 is making sure it's understood that condensation is part of what we're talking about here when we say the manufacturer does not design or check the ventilation, condensation, or energy conservation system unless specified in the order documents, and therefore is not responsible for the adequacy of the specified ventilation, condensation, energy conservation components. So that's an important clarification that we added with respect to that, with regard to the responsibility for ventilation, condensation, and energy conservation as part of the metal building system sale. On the section under inspection, section 3.2.6, We did add a paragraph. I think MBCEA will be glad to see that we're recognizing the AC 478 program, and so you can see in that middle highlighted paragraph, which is new, the builder's commitment to a quality assurance program is important to the overall success of a project. The International Accreditation Services AC 478 helps companies assess and refine their management practices, safety and training programs, and job site inspection programs. And then we further updated the section on inspections there, and we said that the 2024 edition of the IBC introduces special inspection requirements for metal building systems in section 1705.2.6. And again, you probably haven't seen this kick in yet. You probably haven't had a job designed to the 2024 IBC, but as states are adopting that, you will want to make sure you understand this requirement for special inspections that's new in the 2024 IBC. Section 4, materials and fabrication. As you know, the metal building manufacturers have pioneered the use of single-sided web-to-flange welds, and that's part of the efficiency and practice that have made metal buildings very cost-effective to be able to fabricate the tapered members and optimize the amount of steel that's used in the metal building. And so we had some information in the common industry practices on this, and we thought it was important enough we wanted to give it a separate section heading. And so this is not new information, but it's under a new heading in the updated common industry practices, just to talk about that, make sure that's clear. Another change that we've done is as far as it's really just a terminology. We used to talk about structural framing shop primer, and AI. And here's a case where we saw that AISC in their code of standard practice, they have changed some terminology with respect to primers and paints, and so we thought that was a situation where we would parallel their terminology, which perhaps is more consistent with current day terminology. And so instead of talking about a shop primer, we eliminated primer and replaced that with paint. Even though it's, there's no change to what the metal building manufacturer is going to be using, but just the terminology that's used in this common industry practices. And we did want to make sure that we clarified, since we were making this change, that what we're doing here, and you can see the sentence at the end of the first paragraph that's new. Shop paint is sometimes referred to as shop coat or primer. It is not to be construed as a finished coat paint. So we didn't want to confuse people by them thinking that what we used to call primer, we're not calling it primer anymore in the common industry practices, but it's not. That doesn't mean it's what's referred to as a finished coat paint. Section 5 on delivery and receipt. This section, we just had a few modifications. This is one that someone suggested, we're all taking photos with our smartphones. And
yeah, it has. You guys celebrated a birthday.
I think we can hear you there, Sasha. If there's a claim or a defective or incorrect material that a builder is presenting to a manufacturer, taking pictures of that may expedite the claim process. So they just wanted to recognize that and make sure that was something that builders would take advantage of to help communicate what the issue is that they are bringing up. Section 6 under erection and other field work. A few things that we've done there. This is the section that has the work that's usually included in erection. The erector furnishes, and then we have a list of the typical items that an erector furnishes. And what we added to that list is what's now the second item on the list: the labor to provide for a reasonable level of connection shimming, that is to adjust for fabrication and or erection tolerances and variations in anchor rod placement and foundation level. So, and again, this is just recognizing that there is a certain amount of shimming that is typical, and that is not over and above what is what the erector typically furnishes. And then going on, oh, that's the same slide. I think I meant to take out that. This was a little clearer in terms of what we had, what we added there. And then on this list, the sixth item on this list, again, the erector typically, would be the one providing the temporary guise and bracing. We added a line at the end of that says a suggested resource is the temporary bracing guidelines available from MBCEA. This guide was developed to assist metal building contractors and erectors with respect to temporary bracing and sequencing requirements for each metal building project. So we wanted to, recognize that resource that's available, and hopefully, if someone wasn't aware, they would spot it here in the common industry practices and get a copy of that good resource. And then under section 6.4, under concrete slab foundation and anchor rod setting, we wanted to clarify here that the erector is responsible for ensuring that the top of the concrete slab foundation dimensions and anchor rod locations are correct to accommodate the metal building system prior to setting any steel. And you can see before what it said was the erector is responsible for ensuring that concrete dimensions and anchor rod locations are correct. And that this actually was, again, I think an MBCEA suggestion, because it's very broad in terms of, responsible for ensuring that concrete dimensions, a very general term. And so it's now specific, and we're talking specifically here about the top of the concrete slab and foundation, which is the key in terms of the anchor rod locations and everything being ready for the setting of the steel.
Lee, can I interrupt
Yes. Mm-hmm.
with a few questions? Okay, so in stating that the order documents prevail in case of discrepancy between the specs by the EOR and the ODs, would that bring the metal building supplier to share EOR responsibilities at that point in lieu of the supplier being strictly delegated design? And Raphael can unmute and ask that question better if need be.
Yes, thank you for reading my question there. It's just I was a little bit confused because part of the standard, part of the common practices is that the PMB will be delegated design strictly. So if the order documents prevail over what was spec'd by the EOR, we would be providing design input at that point, no?
Well, if I think I understand your question, I think what you're reading there in our common industry practices, it has to do with the order that the metal building in other words, the metal building manufacturer is the one just responsible for designing based on the order documents. If there's a discrepancy, then that's has to be worked through. But I don't think we're saying that we are not considering the EOR's requirements, but they have to be communicated to the metal building manufacturer. And so it's the order. I think the key point here is the order documents have to be correct and include all of the EOR design requirements.
Got it. Thank you.
And we have one other question before you get back into the presentation, Lee. Joe asked, a reasonable level used to mean slight reaming. Is re-drilling holes still considered reasonable for out-of-place anchor rods?
I don't know if I'm the one to address that, but it's a good question. I would say, let me take that back and see if there's anything we need to clarify on that. But I think we were mostly focusing on shimming and not, not reaming and hole size. But let me take that under, advisement and look into that. Thank you for the question. Is that the last one, Sasha?
Yes, that's,
Okay.
we're good.
Okay. Now, this 6.8 under erection tolerances. Now that there are erection tolerances and there are fabrication tolerances. So this section on erection tolerances, you can see that we are referring directly to the AISC Code of Standard Practice and using their erection tolerances. So this is a case where what is in the AISC Code of Standard Practice works for metal buildings, and there's no need for us to repeat that. We just reference those tolerances. So that would have to do with out of plumbness and all of the erection tolerances. So that would be the same thing in the AISC's Code of Standard Practice. And that's nothing new. That's been in our common industry practice for a while now. We used to say that it was the same as AISC Code of Standard Practice, except for out of plumbness, and we had I think we had a little more liberal out of plumbness because it was felt that for a single-story building, as we are typically involved with, the out of plumbness is not as much of an issue as if you're going up with multiple stories. And so, but I think after learning more about the current state of how the metal buildings go up, that we didn't need that more liberal erection tolerances for out of plumbness. So we everything was fine with AISC's Code of Standard Practice values. Now, this is a new section that has a lot of new material, as well as we relocated a few things so that it was more highlighted under this section. And that has to do with installation of bolts. So we had section 6.10 that, the proper installation of all bolts is responsibility of the erector. The metal building manufacturer will provide on the construction drawings which bolts are permitted to be installed snug tight and which bolts must be pre-tensioned. And then going on to talking about when there are pre-tensioned bolts and how those are to be tightened. And we go on and talk about the AISC RCSC specifications and snug tighten bolts and when bolts have to be tensioned and turn of the nut installation. Trying to address, I think on the next slide here, trying to address the pre-installation verification procedure that we didn't mention before in the common industry practices, and just providing some information there that we think will be helpful. We're not really trying to put new onus, but just helpful with information on the pre-installation verification. And we heard every now and then someone will say, well, I did the pre-installation verification, but I wasn't getting the proper tightening condition. And so, well, what do I do? And so we got some input on that, and we provided some input on what one might do to address that and achieve the proper tightening, and what would affect that. And that's noted on this slide here, that there are several reasons why the required minimum pre-tension might not be achieved in compatible nuts and bolts. It goes on to the list what might be affecting that, and hopefully that might be helpful to someone trying to diagnose what the issue is there. And so that's new information that we hope will be helpful.
And we have another question, yes. Lee, if I might interrupt.
Yes.
Who is responsible for performing pre-installation verification? Is it the GC, ODRC, or the erector? Are MTRs required to be provided for bolt assemblies?
I don't know if I have the answer to that in terms of the first part of the question on the contractor. Or I think we use the term erector here when we said the proper installation is responsibility of the erector. But I'm not sure if if on a particular job how that is, how that might be different, depending on the contract on a job with the contractor and erector and so forth. I'm not one to really have information on that, but we refer to the erector in terms of responsibility for bolt installation, and that would include the pre-installation verification procedure. The other question on MTRs, and that's mill test reports, I guess is what we're talking about there on bolts. Is that what that question was?
Yes.
I'm not sure I'm not sure if that's something that would be provided for a bolted assembly. I'm not sure about that. I mean, what is your experience on that?
So typically it's never been asked for, and on a very specific project, they refused even after they are the ones that want to do the pre-installation verification. To just give context, when a lot of times the erector does it, and you just have to make sure that the inspector knows that you're doing it and that they have the opportunity to be present, as long as it's documented. So I'm confused because it's not very clear in the RCSC who's responsible for it, and I just didn't know if anyone knew where it specifically calls out who's responsible. But secondly, after we did it, because this job has been held up, they asked for the MTRs for the bolt assemblies, which has to go back to the manufacturer without calling out who it is, who then has to go to their supplier to get it so that they could say, well, we can't release the bolts because we don't have the MTRs. I understand that the MTRs are provided. The manufacturer has it for all the steel that they're making the building from. But for the bolting assemblies, I've never heard of anybody asking for that before. And I wondered if that was actually a requirement or if they just made that shit up so that they didn't look like they were holding us up.
Yeah, I've not heard of that. It's not come up in any discussions I've had with our members. So it sounds like it's probably not a typical request or requirement. But that's about all I have on that.
Okay. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, good questions. So I think we're ready to move on to the use of shims. And again, we had some information in the common industry practices on the use of shims, but we wanted to have a separate section under this under section 6.10 and talk more specifically about it and how the purpose of shims and the minimal shimming is considered acceptable. And then we go on to discuss the thickness and the gap at around bolts. If it exceeds a 1/16 of an inch, it's one section of the AISE 360 governs and so forth. And so we just wanted to kind of point back to some specific requirements as it relates to shims and try to clarify, I guess, questions that come up from time to time and just sort of make that more, make everyone more aware of that in the common industry practices under this section on shims. We also have, and at the end of the presentation here, which I'm getting close to, when I talk about other resources from MBMA, we have an inspection guide that has a really good section on this as well. So, as a matter of fact, some of this wording I think comes from that inspection guide. So that's another resource if you're not aware of, you might be interested in finding out about that. But we'll get to that at the end. And we're almost through these. The section 7 and 8 on insurance and general requirements. We didn't make any changes on those in the update, so there's really nothing to talk about there. That's the same as it's been. It's pretty general, especially in the general section under those topics. And then the final section under fabrication tolerances. We are looking at some changes there, again, to just clarify a few things. One is that realizing that crane runway beams are, a lot of times they're hot rolled sections that are used. They're not fabricated, built up sections. And so we wanted to point out that for hot rolled sections that are used for crane runway beams, that AISE Design Guide 7 has sweep and camber recommendations that one can look at and utilize. And then we also pointed out that a lot of times this on an end plate, that dimension J, which is sometimes there'll be some distortion in that end plate that extends beyond the flange, where there's welding distortion. And so the point here is that we show this dimension J, and that's for a single piece. If you had two members that you're connecting together, both of them can have that J dimension. That would be the total gap that you'd be looking at, which would be acceptable in terms of the fabrication tolerance. And then we point back to that section we were just looking at on shims. Again, that if that total gap, exceeded a 1/16 of an inch, then that there's more information provided in the discussion in 6.10.3. So that concludes the discussion on the common industry practices, and the focus on the changes that we're looking to introduce. And again, thank you to the MBCEA members who provided input on that. And wanted to then just talk about where you can find resources like the common industry practices. The MBMA.com is the website. We actually have just launched a brand new website, same name, MBMA.com, but looks a little different. This is actually a screenshot from the new web page. And I wanted to show you where you can go to get a copy of the common industry practices that we've been looking at here. And as I mentioned, the current download would not include these changes. These will not go into effect until probably the first of the year in 2025, in terms of those being available to incorporate into a contract. But this is the new website, and to find this common industry practice, you would go under the technical tab there at the top. And when you hit that, there's a pull down menu, and there's the second one down says Design Resources. And when you hit that, you would come up to this page that has the common industry practices right there at the top. And you can download your free copy right there, as well as all the other documents. The acoustics guides there is on the screen there, but I wasn't indicating you should have that necessarily, but there are a lot of resources there on the website, many of which are free downloads. Some will direct you to where they can be purchased, but there's quite a few that are free downloads. So the common industry practice is the resource that we've been focusing on in this webinar, but we also have other resources that builders and erectors should be aware of. As I mentioned, the guide for inspecting metal building systems is a really good guide that goes through a lot of inspection requirements. I talked about the new special inspection requirements that are going to be required in the 2024 IBC. So we're going to be probably focusing more on that and educational opportunities, and making everyone aware of those special inspection requirements, what they are, who's going to be doing them, who's responsible for doing them, and so forth. And then we have the Metal Building Systems Manual, which we are currently updating. The 2024 edition will be out, again, probably by the first of the year. We have a fire guide that's we're just wrapping up a second edition of that, which is very, very useful. We Vince Sagan on MBMA staff who fields the technical questions that come in. We get more questions about fire resistance and fire ratings for metal building systems than any other category of technical topic. So I don't know what everyone's experience on the call is, but we get that quite a bit. You know, hey, I need a 2-hour wall, I need a 2-hour ceiling. What's available? And so the fire resistant design guide has all that information in there, as well as we have some information on our website. And then we have the air leakage best practices, which I believe there was a recent webinar that Robert, Tiffin, and Ben, speaking of Vince, presented to MBCEA members. And then, so those are the main ones that I thought would be of interest to the builders and directors, but we have a lot of other resources on our website that you can check out. So Sasha, that concludes my formal presentation. I'd be happy to see if there's any other questions that anybody might have.
Absolutely. One that several participants are interested in, is there any way to get a document showing all of those changes and or a copy of this presentation? There are some that are interested in specifically what the changes are going to be to the common industry practices.
Yes, certainly could make that available. We're in the process, as I mentioned, of updating the common industry practice, and we have a document that a lot of the slides I showed you were from that document that has the underlined strike through, showing what's changed. We typically don't make that available even to our own members. We, after we have, done the updates, we accept all the changes and then put the new date on the document, and that's what we make available. But I do understand that it's helpful to know what has changed as you're looking at a new document. So yeah, we can look at making that available to your members there, Sasha.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I also included in the chat the instructions on how to get to the design resources. I also put in our members area, we have several of the MBMA resources. Now that we see there's a new website, though, I have to check some of my links. But the technical committee does have many resources that I just kind of wanted to point out to our members and participants on the call. So that's also in the chat. Joe has a suggestion here. I'll read it off to you, but I don't know if it needs to be addressed right now, but it says, could I suggest a further change in wording on section 6.4? The end customer is responsible for all additional costs resulting from errors in the concrete slab and foundation or in the setting of anchor rods, except where the concrete slab and foundation are constructed by the builder. The erector is responsible for ensuring that concrete dimensions and anchor rod locations are correct before setting any steel. He feels the erector should not be responsible for the survey of anchor rods, but only for making sure that the survey matches the erection drawings.
Okay, well, I didn't catch all of the proposed changes, but if you will send that to me, Sasha, I'll
Yep.
look at that and we'll, take it under advisement.
Yeah, Lee,
within our subcommittee.
just very simply that on a small, if you're doing a 100 by 100 building that you can pull a 200-foot tape, this is what the guys in the field are trained to do. They can verify anchor rods on something like that, but you get a 500 by 1,000-foot building, you really need a professional survey and more intense things. The way that it's written right now, where it says the erector is responsible for ensuring the anchor rod locations are correct, that's the part that I'm really worried about. It shouldn't really be the erector's responsibility for that, since the general contractor and the masons are responsible for everything under the base plate. And the way it's written, that could be interpreted that we're responsible to pay someone to survey it. I think our guys are responsible to pull a tape between neighboring anchor rod patterns and to make sure that what the survey that the GC should provide matches what the anchor bolt layout on the erection drawings are. But the way it's written, it kind of sounds like I'm the one that's supposed to perform the survey, and as an erector, I protest.
Yeah, it's I understand your point. Although I think what's in the current common industry practices, that's in the current common industry practice. I think you have an issue with what's in the current one as well, right?
Well, Yes, it's in the current one and that part hasn't really changed in this one. I do like that you were more specific as a group on specifying what concrete dimensions we're supposed to look at. But again, I would love to see it address that an overall survey of the position of the anchor rods should really be done by the general contractor, controlling contractor, or the masonry company. We should only be verifying that survey matches with because we had nothing to do with setting it. So we should only be verifying that matches what our erection drawings say. Because, there's sometimes a gap between architecturals and whatever, but we shouldn't be out there having to verify that they did what they were supposed to do, since none of that below the base plate is our responsibility.
Okay, good. If you'll send me that, Sasha, we can look at that closer.
Yes, I'm taking notes on these questions that we're going to follow up on.
I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we appreciate the feedback, and it's certainly a partnership between the metal building manufacturer and the erector and builder, and anything that can be done to clarify some of these responsibilities and things, and what makes sense is what we're trying to do.
Okay, any final questions before we conclude for the day? Doesn't look like we have any. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you, Lee, for presenting. We truly appreciate it. And
Thank you.
Yeah. Everybody have a fantastic rest of your day. And if you're in Florida, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Be safe.